Welcome back, everyone. This is Chase, and joining me today is Beaver Theodosakis, founder of prAna, among a number of other companies that we'll talk a little bit about as well. Life's a Beach, Bad Boy Club, is it Spy Optics, as well as a board member for the Outdoor Foundation. Are you currently still in that role?
I am, yeah. It's been
still serving on the Outdoor Foundation board. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great what you guys have going there, and I'm happy to contribute to it.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk to you I feel like it's been the last few months. We've been going back and forth and trying to find a time to sit down and have this conversation. But you're so good to send some of the early prAna catalogs to our Outdoor Recreation Archive, and those have been incredible to look at. I wanted to dive in and just learn a little bit more about how you got to where you are, and some of the origins of prAna, and also what you're doing since prAna. But what is your earliest connection to the outdoor, just the outdoors first and foremost? What was your first connection to the outdoors?
First of all, I want to include my wife because she's co-founder.
Yes.
We started the company together. So Pam Theodosakis also, and we both discovered climbing. A friend took us climbing in 1991, first time before our sports were motorsports, many different skiing, different things, but rock climbing. Went to a bouldering area in Southern California, and just the first time we both touched this rock, this beautiful piece of granite that was there for a million years, it just felt so grounding, and just to ascend and just be so present, and we just were just in a different place, and just like immediately fell in love with climbing. Simultaneously, we were just learning about meditation and starting to practice yoga. And this is about 1991. So we got into those two activities, and we're just really enjoying them. They really changed our outlook on life, and how simple and literally down to earth, these things were. We started to look around in the marketplace to say, hey, maybe we could make some apparel for this category that would make sense. And looked around, did some research, and found that there was an opportunity.
What were either of you interested in other outdoor activities prior to discovering climbing? Like, were you outdoor people before that moment?
Yeah, definitely outdoor. I mean, I met Pam in a motocross race, so it's not really outdoor, but grew up racing motocross as a youngster. And but yeah, we were fishing. We were did plenty of boating, canoeing, kayaking, things like that. Hiking, of course, biking. But never really touched a piece of rock like that. And it's just our whole tagline, born from the experience, came from that moment when we were so present, and all that mattered in the world is reaching for that next hold. Nothing else mattered, and just it got us in a meditative state. And at the same time, with yoga and meditation, learning about breath, learning about presence of mind, stillness. It kind of all came together right there. And that's really, like I said, born from the experience. 30 years later, still using that tagline. It really was from those moments.
Have you since had that experience with any other activity, or has it been purely yoga and climbing for either of you?
Well, for me, it's been it changed my life and kind of lit the spark. And now I approach everything that way. I fly fishing. I can be in a zone for 4 or 5 hours, just completely in a trance. Pam with her horse riding, she's a equestrian rider, so same thing. And she's got an animal there that, weighs 10 times more than her. And so it's a special attunement with another being too. So she's playing at high states there also. But even the simplest things, weed whacking, washing dishes, I think we've just learned, whatever you're doing, do it all the way. Really, that's what born from the experience is. It's just being just fully present. And it's okay to let your mind wander and whatever, daydream. But when you're in activities, I'm also a pilot, so flying, it's another form of meditation. You're really into all the senses are alive and switched on. So to answer your question, yes, pretty much in everything now.
Wow. When did you start to recognize, I guess, product as being, well, something that, first of all, someone had to create, right? I think a lot, I guess, prior to even my role working in this program, working for the university, I don't know if I gave the products that I interact with any second thought. Like I didn't think of, oh, someone had to create this, right? Was there a moment for you, whether it was that experience climbing or prior to that, did you ever have an interest in product or have a moment where you recognize, oh, people do this for a living, people make this stuff?
Well, I had some experience in the 80s with the surf brands, Life's a Beach and Bad Boy Club, started with a few buddies. So I had some apparel background in that. And that was more, it was the 80s. So it was a little more about show, a little about, standing out and being different, with Life's a Beach. It was, skull and crossbones and, 80s kind of stuff that we would put on apparel more for shock value. But with prAna, it was more about purpose built and, to have freedom of movement and breathability and hidden features that you would use that maybe weren't so obvious. It was really thinking about crafting for the experience, crafting for people's endeavors, playing at a high level. We always brought in our athletes, ambassadors, for insights, because they were out doing it every day. So gathering the nectar from them and putting them into product details. Then it became a craft, it became a craft. But with prAna, it wasn't about covering your body. Our mantra was purpose-built designs with hidden technical features and street styling. It was kind of our mantra. It had to look good because as we researched the market, we found out that, the stuff was functional back then, early 90s, when we were looking around, but it didn't have a lot of style. The
Right.
peg legs and high waist and shiny and noisy. And so we brought more of a street, everyday wearability kind of to the designs, but had the technical ability to get the job done.
Right. Right. I guess even prior to starting Life's a Beach and Bad Boy Club, did you have a moment where you recognized, oh, I could make product? Like what motivated some of those decisions to make something?
The need,
yeah.
The need, especially with prAna, it was okay. We're climbing now 5 days a week, and I want a pant that we can literally wear out to a meal, at night, and then get up in the morning. And we had a mantra too that was about sleeping in the train station. If there was one pant that you could live in, that was our first pant called the Mojave trouser, and it was trousers to live in. That you could do, work in them, play in them, sleep in them. Pretty much, if you had one pant, this would be it. And that turned into our Zion through the years with the stretch woven nylon fabric and, more durable technical fibers. But it started with the Mojave, our first product.
And we're jumping kind of a little bit ahead, but like when you thought of that, like multi-purpose type product, where was the industry at that time? Did you feel like companies at that time were creating product for multiple uses, or was it still very, okay, I have this jacket that I use for this one activity, or this pant that I work for this? Did you feel like what you were doing was truly new in that way, that you were creating product that people could climb in, do yoga in, or, go into town with? Like, did that feel new to you?
It felt new to us. Yeah. Everything was pretty specialized then, I have to say. And, one anecdote that's super memorable is our top climber, Chris Sharma, who was, probably the preeminent climber in the last decades in the climbing world, called when he was 14 years old. And he was wearing another company's apparel already. He was at 13, like people are saying, who is this kid? He's amazing. He called me at 14 and said, hey, I want to wear your stuff. I have a few pieces and I really like it because I could wear it to school. And then as soon as I get out of school, I can just go bouldering in it or climbing in it and I don't have to change. And the stuff he was wearing, I won't mention the other brand, but his quote was, when I'm wearing that stuff, it makes me feel like I'm on the Star Trek movie set. It was, very peg leg and tight here, very purpose built for climbing, but you wear it anywhere else and people are like, is that guy a ballerina or a dancer? What, It worked, but it didn't have that crossover. So
Right.
Chris, one of our people that, helped us go the distance in a good way, right away at that age recognized that versatility was key for him.
Right. So it seems like very, very similar to so many of the, I guess the foundational outdoor companies, right, that we think of in the 70s, 60s and 70s. Like you made products that you used, right? You saw a need because you were the one doing the activity. And that in that way, like there's a thread tied between your company and companies like, Chenard, Chenard / Patagonia, right? Among a number of the other companies of that time, the North Face, of those people who were doing the activities. But I think of Patagonia most of all, right? Yvon making, climbing equipment because he was the one that needed to do it. And then a business sprung from that. When did you recognize that, okay, we're making something for us, but there's also enough people out here that we could make a career of this or make a business ourselves? When did that transition happen for you and Pam?
Well, it was probably 10 months or so of just designing and making products that worked well for us and our friends, our yogi friends, our climber friends, getting it on them, hearing their insights, whatever, and assessing the market and looking around like, okay, well, this is a different market than the action sports industry, which is where Life's the Beach and Bad Boy Club came from. This is the outdoor industry. Let's go to the first trade show and look around. And, we got in and saw the company, saw the landscape of things, met some dealers, handpicked 7 dealers to start in heavily traveled climbing destinations, and said, okay, these are going to be our beacons, kind of our place where we're going to put a flag in the ground, and met with the owners and said, here's what we're doing. We had 7 styles. I remember in all the shops, all the experiences, laying them on the floor. Didn't have a rack, nothing fancy, little swatches of fabric. This one will come in blue and yellow and green, whatever. And here it is in orange. And saying, here's what we got. And I can build you guys a rack too out of scrap steel, and I can fit it right in this corner. We can take measurements and we'll put a little sign on there. And all 7 of them said yes. And they happened to be, Smith Rock. There was actually Black Diamond here in Salt Lake. There was a Joshua Tree, heavily traveled climbing destinations where people were coming from all over the world to climb at the time. And the idea was to showcase the brand there. And so that's what we did. And that's kind of how it started to echo. And, within 6 months, we got calls from France, from Switzerland, from Germany, different countries. Climbers went through there and said, hey, I bought your products. I like them. I want to now sell them in this country. Can I distribute your products?
If there is a playbook for the outdoor industry for how to, I don't know if there's any way to crack it, but it seems like there's a common, at least a common thread there where you make product for the extremists, right? Those people who are pushing it to its limits. And then it starts to get out there to everyone else, right? In a way, right? It's like you make the best possible product to, climb the highest peaks. And then the person who just needs a nice jacket to go out and get the mail, right, or go to work is going to want the best, right? And it trickles down. It seems similar in a way to what you did, right? You were focused on those high achievers, those athletes, and then it reached the people who were just wanted something for travel, right?
Later, but for the first 5 years, our plan was 5 years of sustained focus only in climbing yoga, with the goal of being a household name globally in climbing yoga. Like we didn't venture out. We didn't make button-down shirts. We didn't do anything it was always just, it was a full circle we had with, the guys wearing the stuff. We were hitting all the events, on the ground, in the climbing competitions, in the yoga studios, on the mat. It was very kind of a groundswell, and deep roots. Had a lot of great storytelling and substance to the brand early on, where people, for the seekers that really wanted to go deep, there was things to talk about.
Right.
Even the name prana, it's a 5,000-year-old Sanskrit word. Not obvious. We had people that would write us letters, countless letters, that buying our stuff for 5 and 7 years, never even knew what prana meant. And then they found out what it meant, and it was more meaningful to them. Because it wasn't like a billboard. There's discovery, and I think that was an important part of our brand too. As we left a lot of discovery for the consumer to find on their own. It wasn't big obvious. So we'd leave breadcrumbs, we called it, where people could follow along and kind of learn more about the brand and get deeper. And not everyone did. There was maybe 3 to 5% of the people, the real seekers that really wanted to know more. We brought in things like sacred geometry into design influence and other things like that grabbed the real influencers. Another one of our mantras was influence the influencers. It wasn't trying to cater to the masses, like you just said.
Well, I mean, you mentioned sacred geometry there. I mean, you really started to embed a lot of that in your catalogs. And I'm just always amazed by catalogs. And, we're in that business of preserving the history of the industry, mostly print and catalogs first and foremost. And there's one catalog that in particular, it's someone, in the middle of a yoga session, and you see that sacred geometry, right? Or you see that spiral. And I mean, you really did start to embed that really in those marketing materials. What difference did that make to people? Like you said, I mean, the people who get it. And then other people, they see it and think, oh, wow, that's really beautiful or stunning. But
Well, the thing about sacred geometry is you don't recognize it, but it just feels nice for some reason.
mm-hmm.
But it's the geometry found in nature. So even some of the catalogs, I'm not sure if you have those ones, but they were built in the geometry 1.618. So one side, the long border is 1.618 times the side of this border. And there's just something about that feeling, and if you learn about sacred geometry, that it's found in nature, and countless nautilus shells and butterflies, and so many things are built on that geometry just naturally. It was fun, and it was for us, it was just intriguing and interesting and deep, and like I said, there's a few percent of the people recognized it, but that was enough for us to, and those people, you were fanatics. Like that was our thing with prAna. Like we had some real fanatics for the brand, like a fair amount of people that would really, really love the brand, and they really became the mouthpiece for us in spreading the word about this brand. And fortunately, they were influential people, so that was important. Alignment with values, like when we choose our ambassadors, employees, that was number one, to create a culture that gets it, that's not too heady. Still, there's a lot of humility. We never preached this stuff. We never said our way was the way. We're holier than thou. Never that. Everyone was welcome, but we it was kind of a quiet confidence we had to the brand, and we didn't. It was more of a whisper, right. And we earned people one handshake at a time. It was not a digital era, so it literally was meeting people in person at events or in yoga studios or at climbing crags, one person at a time. And that's what our ambassadors did for us. People like Chris Sharma and Fred Nicole that were so aligned with our values. They were the kind of human manifestation of the brand, with their humility, their enthusiasm for people, their thinking, about the good in all things. They were the ones we chose to represent our brand.
Well, you talk about values, and that's a word that we hear all the time now, and it's like innovation. It's probably lost its meaning in some ways because we hear it so often. And what does it actually mean? But and in our industry, in the outdoor industry, I think especially values is talked about. But I think the point that you made with sacred geometry being embedded in everything and that connection to nature, I don't know if any company ever really goes as deep as that, right? To that point. I think a lot of companies will spell out, here are our values and here's what we do, and here are policies that we'll follow or initiatives but to embed that so deep into even the marketing material, and it's like everything we produce from a design perspective will adhere to this sacred geometry that ties back to nature, I think is kind of another level of living your values, if that makes sense. And I don't know if other companies think about it as, I know that there's a lot of, intention behind a lot of the companies now that have great values, but to go as deep as that's got to have an effect on people.
Well, thanks. It did on us, and the people in the building and the culture, and the growing audience. So it was an echo. Like I said, it was a pebble in the water, and it wasn't a billboard saying, here's what we do, here's what we are. People discovered that, and
right.
But even our color palettes, we would come back with a maple leaf that just has the perfect shade of orange. It's just turned for fall, and that would be in the palette. And then there'd be lichen, a lime green lichen on the north side of this rock that we just climbed. That would be this ultimate lime green. And our color palette was literally elements of nature that we would go try to match and put into textiles.
which seems so different from we talked recently with some of the early employees of the North Face, so coming up in the 70s and 80s, coming into their own, and their color blocks are, that bright red, that yellow, that blue, right? Not traditionally colors that you do see in nature. And that's not a dig against the North Face, but it's a different thought process that I think is an interesting contrast.
Yeah, and when we were tuned in and doing things in the middle of prAna, like we would gather inspiration from nature and just the craziest things. Just come back with, like I said, rocks and this and that, and just like, oh, here's our palette. Look at how this goes. Here's a cool warm shift. We've got, and it was so much fun.
Right. Oh, I bet.
We would grab, just the craziest things, and like that's.
What's the craziest thing you brought into the office that you saw? Do you remember?
Pam would probably think of, I can't think of it right now, but I just know it was just a lot of natural elements and things. And,
right.
I mean, I think there was an old rusted, there was a part of a car that was rusted out in the middle of nowhere. We were climbing or something. Someone drove it off a cliff, and the color of the rust on the door panel was like just a beautiful color.
Right. Right. Oh, that's incredible. Well, I think the 90s for the outdoor industry was probably a really interesting time to come up. I've got some specific questions about, I guess, that era, but what were the companies were there companies prior to starting prAna that inspired you or you looked up to? I mean, at this point, prAna is kind of coming up in this like probably third generation of outdoor companies. You have Ella B and Eddie Bauer, 20s and 30s. And then, Chenard, Patagonia and the North Face, 60s and 70s. Right. Well, and Jerry, I guess you could put Jerry and Holy Bar in there as well, but this is kind of like the third generation of outdoor companies coming up in the 90s. Were there companies prior to that you looked up to or really admired or took inspiration from?
Without a doubt, Patagonia, I'd say number one. And there's a long story on how they helped us get into creating more sustainable goods. We had the intentions and stuff, but we just adored what they did and how they just held the line, no compromise. The way they would do just the boldest moves and say, we're going to only make organic cotton. I remember when they did that, 5 years ago, and their products were all of a sudden 20% higher than everybody else's. They're like, we don't care, this is what we're doing. So their ballsiness, I always respected a ton.
Right.
And how they held the line, no compromise. So they were one for sure. Other companies in other industries, just because they were at the epicenter of their industry and they represented a core consumer and had the respect of that influencer. I think we took inspiration from that. Billabong in the early days, it's a surf brand in Australia. Just say that, you could wear a Billabong shirt to a motocross race or to an art show or to wherever. And when Billabong was it, you were cool no matter what. Even though you were wearing a surf shirt to something completely different, that brand represented authenticity. So I think we were inspired by companies like that just to be truly authentic.
What, having this company come into its own in the 90s, I think of other companies from around this time. Black Diamond, well, going from Chenard to Black Diamond in 89, Black Diamond really started to take off. And then Mountain Hardwear, also around that same time, interestingly enough, now, part of the same family under Columbia as prAna. But is there any common thread that you see between companies in the outdoor space that came of age in the 90s? Is there any parallel there or any similarities between those types of companies?
It was a more of a wide open landscape, I think, compared to now. And like I said, a pretty simple playbook of blocking and tackling, having your brand differentiators and your product differentiators and kind of following your theme. You had the era of the outdoor retailers who were thriving at the time. It was a really ripe landscape for creating a business with a point of difference. There's only, with regards to apparel, in outdoor shops, we watched it go from 3 or 4 or 5 racks in the average little store. and mostly gear and tents and hard goods, to dominating the store with apparel products.
Right.
We watched a huge transformation there.
Right.
So I think the parallel between those companies, people had you could put their logo and you understood, it was clear, maybe because it wasn't such a crowded landscape, it was pretty clear on what they stood for, what type of products they made, their price points, who their customer was. You could map them and easily, and I think the lines are blurred now a lot more. Companies are doing a lot more categories, and they're softening. I call it softening, but they're trying to appeal to a wider audience now. We were all pretty focused on what we were doing. Mountain Hardware's making stuff for people doing their expeditions. Obviously Patagonia, we know what they're up to. And ours was yogis and climbers.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So pretty narrow.
It also seems interesting that right before this time, right before the 90s, it seems like there's a lot of acquisitions happening too. Right. It seems like there was a lot of consolidation. You probably have more insights into this than I do, but I mean, you had companies like Frostline Kits, right, where you make your own products. I mean, those companies were getting acquired, or the North Face got acquired around that time. It just seemed like there was, at the same time, there was a lot of consolidation. There was a lot of like rebirth, right, and new ideas and new companies springing out of that consolidation. I don't know if they're directly related, but maybe there was kind of a pushback in the 90s towards starting your own thing again.
Could have been. There was other macro trends, that we got to ride, not early 90s, but later, the women's empowerment side of things. prAna originally was about 80% men and 20% women, the early lines. And then, 10 years later to now, it's 70% women, 30% men, as far as the intermix on products and product sales. Let's see, the point I was going to make there was, where's your question again? I got off topic.
Well, I guess you were saying that prAna kind of rode some of these macro trends.
Oh yeah, the other trends. So women's empowerment, we're in the right spot for there. The outdoor industry, the outdoor industry was blowing up then. We happen to be riding that big wave. We happen to get in at the right time in the right shops and ride a really nice wave there. Yoga, yoga apparel didn't exist 30 years ago. We rode that wave. And then the conscious consumer movement, people that wanted to know where their products are made, what they're made from, who's making them, same with their food, more and more about being conscious consumers. And we got to ride that wave and still are riding that wave. And that's really where the big growth came for prAna. We were early on dealing with conscious communities of climbers and yogis. They weren't just dumb consumers. These people started to care about those things early on before everybody else. So that kind of set us up to be able to be in a good position as this big wave of global conscious consumerism kind of came our way.
Right. So how far into the company did you realize, okay, we've got something? Like what were some of those early successes for you? You mentioned working heavily with influencers. I guess we would call them influencers now, but athletes at that time, and who went on to influence the influencers, as you said. But what were some of those milestones, those early days that really set you up to succeed long-term or set you apart?
Yeah, there was a couple really important moments. We were running out of the house for the first year and a half. My wife and I, we had a couple roommates, and we slowly moved them out as we needed their bedrooms for inventory. So we were in the house alone, 1,260 square foot house, and stuff everywhere. The garage was a cutting room, and I was dyeing in the washing machines early on.
Wow.
Like mixing dyes with powder and chemicals and fixers, and Pam was sewing. I did all the cutting for the first probably 3 years, all the cuts. And then we had our first sewer was Tina Pham. She had a nail shop where a Vietnamese lady where they did people's nails, but in the back she had 3 or 4 sewing machines. So when we outgrew Pam's ability to keep up, we would bring stuff down to Tina Pham, and she would sew it for us in San Diego. So super like grassroots, homegrown, really from the beginning.
I feel like that's so different from, a number of the other stories that I've heard of outdoor companies that start in the US, maybe it's a pack that they sew locally, right? Like I think of Jim and Greg with Wilderness Experience, they're sewing packs, right, in the US. Apparel is a whole nother animal, a whole nother challenge. I mean, I mean, obviously today we're not really, you can't really find any factories or people who are sewing their own clothes. I guess maybe that you were kind of coming out of that era of Frostline kits. People were still sewing patterns together, but I guess it's such a foreign concept to us now that people, you could start a company by sewing all the clothes yourself. That's incredible.
Well, we didn't have a whole lot of money at the time, so we were making do with what we had, and buying rolls of fabric. Actually, we're doing everything in white. So our snake white fleece was a white fleece that we would buy, and then the cotton lycra was white. And there's a Palomar dye, a local dye shop, was just 3 miles away from us. So we would build batches in white, and then we were very flexible with inventory and lead times. So if the store had a good run on blue, we could say, okay, Mike, we need more blue, and bring it over in the truck. And, here's 30 pants and 20 of these, dye them all, and then we get it back. So it was really great for inventory management to make everything in white the first year or so. And probably 5 or 6 of our products, momentum pant, momentum short, women's tornado top. So that helped. We thought about inventory management and having limited capital. And so kind of built it like that. And the neat thing about it, we started doing some really technical, not technical, but technique washes, suede wash, and all these really interesting one-of-a-kind dyeing techniques that really made each garment one of a kind.
Do you feel like by being closer to the process, like you were able to do some of those things that were unique, that weren't really being done in the market? You had that ability to experiment?
Oh, without a doubt. I'd be up till the middle of the night, like creating the most punchy orange. Like, it wasn't fluorescent, of course, but it was still like a natural orange, like nature, and just this beautiful, just rich, saturated orange. Because I was actually mixing the dyes to create these colors. And I remember this competition, rock and roll, they needed 80 shirts for these climbers. Climbing gyms were just getting going. They said, hey, would you do the shirts for us? And I said, yeah, I got this amazing color. I'm going to make them for you guys. So we printed all these, or dyed all the 80 some orange shirts, and then we had them printed with the logos, and all the competitors had them. And it was late, and I was running out of fixative, so I kind of skimped on the fixative to cure the dye. So about a week after the competition, we started getting calls from people. Hey, all my laundry is orange now. It dyed all. And it bled into everybody's clothes. I'm like, oh, what a nightmare. So I started to relieve my duties of dyeing after that.
Were there other moments like that where, maybe not that moment in particular, but early failures where you thought, oh, we're not going to recover from this? Did you have moments like that?
Oh my God, yeah. Our snake bite, we get an order from REI when we're 2 years old. Okay, we just moved out of the house into our first 1,300 square foot building. We go show a guy named Bill Owen, wonderful man, still friends with him. He was a buyer at REI climbing department. And we show him our line, and he orders this momentum pants, shorts, the snake bite fleece, which was a tapered fitting fleece designed for climbing, gussets of lycra under the arms so you can move freely. And it was nice and short, so it wouldn't get in the way of your gear when you're up on the route. We had a batch for REI, and it was like, this is huge for us. Like REI, like we're just taking it so seriously. It was a big opportunity. So we made all these snake bite fleeces in white, and they all look beautiful. We sent them over to Mike at Palomar Dye, and it was a deep eggplant, like a deep purple eggplant color, beautiful color. And we get them back, and we pick them up, and we look at them. We're like, they shrunk super short, like unsellable. And we're just like, the whole batch, we had no other fabric to recut, anything like that. The whole batch was super short-waisted, and we're just like, oh my God, we're going to miss the delivery date. They're going to drop us. We're screwed. This is terrible. So then we just had a brainstorm and took cotton lycra sheets, like 6 or 8 foot or yard pieces, and dyed them the same color, got them to match pretty close. Cut the lycra in about 4 or 5 inch bands like this, and sewed it on the bottom of the snake bite fleeces where they were short. And said, basically, that tucks in your harness now, and it actually works better.
Wow.
It doesn't look as good on the street, but for pure climbing, it worked better. So we patched it up made the delivery date, and the rest is history. We sold REI for the 28 years after that.
Wow. That's incredible.
But it was a big scare for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
We scrambled and pulled it off. So
Wow.
there's many of those. We had literally $1 million worth of inventory come into our warehouse, women's yoga pants. And this is the same issue that the folks at Lululemon had like 6 or 8, 10 years ago. It was a big thing with the pilling because we had the same fabric as them, made by the same manufacturer. And huge batch cans and pallets and truckloads of, it's spring now. We're getting ready to deliver all these yoga pants. And so Pam grabbed a pair just to test. We're on our way to Joshua Tree. We go climbing. And before she even starts climbing, they're pilling where the legs are touching and, where seatbelt was, driving there. We're like, wait a minute. We called production. Hold on a second. There's a problem with this stuff. We found out it was over peached. So, peaching is a process where you're sanding the fibers lightly to give it a softer hand. It was over peached and it broke down the fibers to where they immediately started pilling on the first wearing.
Wow.
So it was a major, major mistake. We had to fly over there and settle with the guys and see who was accountable. We kind of shared accountability in it. But one thing at prAna, our mantra for product was, if it stays in our building, it's a small problem. Even if it's $1 million on pallets of brand new product we just paid for, it's a small problem because we kept it in the building. We never let it leave the building. Didn't let it get out in the stores. Didn't get, lose all these customers. We earned their trust over the years. So I came up with in a day, a new brand called Tantra. And we made a new label, got the trademark going, and we paid local sewers to take every prAna label off the garments. There was 2 on each of these garments, thousands and thousands of garments, and put the Tantra label on there. So they weren't prAna goods anymore. And we sold it to TJ Maxx and Marshalls. For cost, got some cost out of it, negotiated with the vendor. And then we called all our dealers, told them the truth, and said it's going to be 90 days till we can deliver. You wanted it in March, really sorry, you're not going to be getting it until May, June. And they were all cool with it. We just got beat because then we delivered the product, it was right. But that's a huge lesson for people in school here with product. Don't let it leave the building. It was really important. It was a big setback, no doubt. We're hoping we lost all those turns too, because those people would have been delivered, all those dealers in March. We probably got reorders in April, May, June. We lost all those turns. So it was millions of dollars. It cost us in the short run, but it saved our reputation in the long run.
Wow. Well, there's probably not any Tantra product out there at all, right? You probably can't find any of that on eBay, can you?
No,
floating around.
It worked though, because it didn't tarnish our name, but we got our cost of it. And some person was happy because they probably bought a $80 yoga pant for $20.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. Wow. Oh, that's great. What was it like being in the outdoor industry during, the dot-com era and that transition? You saw monumental changes in how product is sold, right? That affect us to this day. And I talked to one of the co-founders of Mountain Hardwear, Al Tabor, and he was kind of the IT guy at the time. And as having that person as a co-founder is unique, right? Like having someone who knows the technology. That's just standard today. But what was that transition time like for prAna, kind of coming into this new era of e-commerce?
Well, the name prAna.com, or the URL prAna.com, was owned by a doctor in Japan. So we wanted to get it. And so we negotiated with him and bought it. I think it was $5 or $10,000, which at that time was a lot of money for us. And we said, well, this is happening. We need to be there. So we got it early on with no conflict, and slowly built our business. And like I said, everything was done, analog before, like everybody else. We were at events. We were, meeting people. We're in stores. It was just very hands-on. And all of a sudden, this way to accelerate the business came up. And fortunately, we had a good graphic guy, James Gilbert, did great work for us for 25 years. And we had a nice website and a nice presence pretty early on, and started to have some web sales. It was averaging 6 to 8% of our sales, I think, as we went along, until 2010 when some big changes came and we really got into the catalog/web business. And now it is, I think, direct to consumer is 45% of prAna's business.
Wow. What year did you say you launched that website?
I'd have to say it was 90. I'm thinking about the building we're in because I remember some of the conversations. I'm thinking 97, 6.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, just being
Well,
so forward thinking on that.
well, our first employee, Damien, wasn't quite an IT guy, but he loved technology and he loved that. So he pushed for that.
Wow.
You know, I was the complete opposite. I loved when our computer systems went down because I said, great, we can finally get some work done around here.
Yeah.
Because everyone was always just so focused on the computers. But I was like a caveman. And as the business, evolved, I was like the old guy that was holding it down to like human touch, live experience, live conversations, tactile feeling stuff and talking to people and everyone else wanted to move on. So I was kind of the old dog in the building, but we had our tensions that were healthy.
Right.
So Damien led that up. He saw the opportunity, said, hey, we're selling in 9 countries already. And just think, we can go global now. And then we had a set up in France with a little warehouse where we could service the European Union with direct to consumer. So some kind of big thinking early on.
How did you learn a lot of this? I mean, this is like the same challenge as many founders, right? Like you start a company and then you just have to figure a lot of things out. Like how did you figure out how to work with the factory or, learn the nuances of global trade and, all of that? Like it's just a learning process, but did you have any mentors or anyone who helped guide you along the way? You mentioned Patagonia being an influence, but who helped you figure out how to do some of these things? Or did you and Pam just figure it out yourselves?
It was pretty much winging it, and, creating relationships, building trust. It was with a bank or a distributor overseas or, a vendor, doing what you say you were going to do, delivering on your promises and building trust. And I think people will take risk with you when you earn that trust with them. So in so many respects, I think that had a lot to do with just being honest and open with people and being humble and saying, I don't know. Can you help me with this? And usually people, when you're honest like that, want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a big part of our culture too, is, we didn't really blow smoke, where there wasn't a whole lot of BSing going on. In the 80s there was, and I came from other businesses like that. And with prAna, the culture was just like, if someone says it'll be there at 3:00 on Thursday, it's there at 3:00 on Thursday.
Right.
Whether it be a vendor payment, whether it be, a distributor order, or whatever it is, there was a lot of integrity through the entire organization. I think it really served us well.
Right. Well, you mentioned this earlier, but was it hard to be open to maybe rethinking slightly what the company was or who it was for? You mentioned that moment of bringing climbing and yoga into one catalog. Is that right? Were they separate before and you had to bring them together? And then later on adding travel, like were those hard moments for you, or was it pretty natural to say, oh no, this is who we are. This is where we're going. Did you ever have any moments where you felt like, is this really who we are? What was that like for you when these big moments came where you needed to, when you kind of open things up more?
Yeah, I don't think we ever had the moments that is this really who we are. We felt really good about where we were because it was authentic to us. It was just it was really around our lives, and there was no facades. There was, it was just, this is who we are. So that honesty and authenticity, I think, was there. The catalogs, we were worried a little bit about turning off our consumers. So we had these yogis, and then we had these climbers, and they were similar in many, many ways, but also different in many ways. So as we were having these separate catalogs, the first probably 5 or 6 years, we would slowly start to infuse a little climbing into the yoga catalog and vice versa. Then we started to go to events where climbing events, we would put on the yoga class in the morning for everyone to stretch and do some yoga before competing in climbing. And then we would go to Wanderlust and these different yoga events and put on a climbing clinic where we take people climbing. And so we started to cross-pollinate the two. And then all of a sudden, it just felt so natural. We just started seeing more and more signals and more people doing both activities and ambassadors that were proficient in both, spreading the word. And it just kind of felt like, okay, now's the time. Like we've kind of assessed the risk. We've warmed people up to it. And here you go. Here's the catalog. And since then, every catalog has had yoga and climbing in it.
I think you and Kenji talked about this in a prior interview, but the number of climbing gyms that also have yoga studios in them, it's the majority, right? Do you feel like prAna had a hand in that or influenced the direction of these two groups coming together? I mean, do you feel like that was prAna? You were the one that brought those groups together?
I wouldn't go that far. I'd say that because we were an influential brand at the time, we probably had something to do with it. Other factors coming together. But when we look back on it, like I said with Kenji, there's rarely a climbing gym being built that doesn't offer yoga.
Right. Yeah, I bet. Well, if you're not going to say it, I'll say it. It was you, right? You did it. It seems like it, right? At least you nudged it in that direction. Was there a similar? How did travel come about then? I mean, because it doesn't sound like the company ever forced anything. Like, oh, well, travel's a big business. We need to shoehorn ourselves into travel. It seems like everything you let that come naturally to you. So was that a similar experience when the company started to become a yoga climbing travel company?
It was, and that all became because of the product. We started to use these stretch wovens that wouldn't wrinkle, that you didn't need to wash for a week, that were indestructible. And even in our shirts, we were using organic cotton at the time, but we said, let's put 10 or 20% poly in there because it helps with wrinkle resistance. Let's put a little stretch in there for this or that if you're sitting on an airplane. So it was a product naturally worked for travel. So it opened the door for us. And then, people like REI that it had many different departments. Most outdoor retailers, smaller guys, just had their floor and they had their different clothes. But, the bigger, more sophisticated retailers like REI had a travel department. And then guys would say, hey, you know what, this pant and this, let's create a collection for these guys. We're in their sportswear section. We're in their climbing section. So the REI did a lot for us with regards to helping structure our lines and delineate the differences and kind of focus collections. And REI has been nothing. We won the REI Vendor of the Year a couple times, and it's a really wonderful award. They're kind of the real pros. They know what they're doing in the industry, obviously. And I remember, I think it was 2004 when we won the overall REI Vendor of the Year. Sally Jewell was the CEO, and 15 of the top 1,500 vendors that they sell to were in the room, 5 in each category, apparel, hard goods. I forgot the other one, but Sally got up and spoke in front of us all, and great companies were in the room. The Black Diamonds of the world and Patagonias and the most respected companies were in there because Sally said, you're all in this room because you're incredible vendors to us. Your service is, top notch. Your products sell. Your sustainability initiatives, your social issues, all the soft tissue parts of brands. You guys are in here because you're all great at that. prAna is the overall winner of the REI Vendor of the Year this year because they took us places we never thought we could go. And that was Pam always pushing the edge on women's design. Yes, it had the function, but we were doing, sublimated women's stretch tops that, in yoga with a beautiful mandala, from it was drawn 2,000 years ago that, we brought to life with colors from nature and just push the envelope, printed women's tops. And, she had stretch women's bell-bottom jeans in REI. Like, Sally Jewell was wearing, she talked about it, prAna jeans, at the announcement of the award winner. So she says, in the versatility, I'm wearing it. I'm, whatever, 60 years old, and my daughter wears it. She's 22. prAna has a real breadth as far as age, being attracted to the different ages.
Right.
So she brought up those points, and that was a huge thing for us and for Pam, because she would sit with the buyers, and many times, that's the problem with some of these big stores is you have to get to the consumers, you have to get over the hurdle of the buyers. And the buyers are not necessarily super fit or climbers or yogis, and maybe they don't get it in many cases, but they're looking at numbers and spreadsheets and merchandising reports, and they're the ones doing the buying. So Pam had to push them. She had to say, try this, trust me, let's try a few racks, and just, oh, there's the dogs. So with REI, my wife Pam had to really push them to get them to take chances. And we did it in small doses. We said, let's try it in 6 stores and just these racks and see what happens. And I said, wow, it's good. Let's go to 18 stores. Let's go to 32 stores. So pushing the edge of design with regards to style, but always covering the bases with function is really what got us our big growth with REI.
Right. Well, how does it, I mean, you've probably reflected on this plenty, but being athleisure before athleisure, right? And I think athleisure can have a negative connotation in some ways, but being athleisure in that you are wearing something that is multifunctional, right? That you could perform in or go around town. Like, how does that feel now, looking at in retrospect at like where the industry now and how far ahead you were when you started?
Yeah, I mean, we're amongst a bunch of others, thinking similarly.
Yeah.
I said the product led it because the product worked for that. And, if we go back to our original mantra, it had to be street smart styling.
Right.
So
right.
it kind of worked to be a product that you wear every day.
So as the company grows, I mean, obviously you get to a point where I am jumping ahead a little bit here, to a point where the company sells in 2014. Was there a moment ever when you and Pam looked at each other and said, wow, like look how far this has come. Like we could never have imagined that we got to this point, right? Like, was there a moment even before the sale where you had some of those moments where you just said, wow, we have this many employees, like there's these people counting on us. How did we do this? Like, how did we get here? Like, when did some of those moments happen?
There was a bunch of them. So not sure if you have in your records, but we sold back in 2005 to,
oh, no.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting story. So we're going, 12, 13 years, never took in a penny of investment. We did not want to compromise the ideals of the business and be put on a treadmill to grow. We said, nope, we're going to grow this thing pure and organically when people want it. We're not going to force feed it. We didn't have sales reps. It was all just one store telling another. And we put all our money, instead of paying 10% of the reps, we focused on the end consumer and created a pull strategy, like a vacuum in the stores, to where dealers literally countless times would come up to Outdoor Retailer Show and say, all my employees and all my customers are saying, I got to have this prAna brand, so show me what you got. And we would like elbow each other, and our partner Damien and Pam and I, our first employee, because it came full circle and the vacuum was created. So what would happen, we'd build an order for them, we'd ship it to them. The employees would call the key customers that have been waiting for it, and the employees, and it would evaporate. And the guy would call us the same day, he just got 4 boxes, he's got a half a box left, and create a reorder. And then he would tell the other stores in other territories that weren't competitive what went on. So that was kind of the mouthpiece for the brand on a wholesale level, this pull strategy. And we did it because for one in the 80s, we had enough reps, and I wasn't, I didn't like the loss in translation with a rep showing up that had 4 other lines and they're rushing through. So we said, let's wait till we have the demand. We didn't have the pressure of investors to grow. We could just grow very organically. We lived very lean and mean. prAna was a super lean ship. We had no fancy anything. My desk for 5 years was a piece of plywood with 2 sawhorses on it in the warehouse, because I gave the employees, a better place to sit. And Pam and I would, give up our spots, and we paid our employees. Our first 5 years, we didn't really pay ourselves much except just what we needed to live, because we knew if we kept that money in the business, in 90 days, we can turn that money and triple it. So that's how we cash flowed it. We put our house on the line for a bank loan. We said, okay, here's our house as collateral. We need a loan. We got trade credit by building trust with our vendors. paying them on time. They said, we need to check by here. We made sure it was delivered on that date. We started to grow internationally. Some of our distributors paid us money up front for their orders, which helped us cash flow. So we pieced it together and built it from zero. First year in the house doing 360,000 to 30 million in 2005.
Wow.
So 12 and a half years with a 21% EBITDA. So highly profitable for the apparel business and turning that money. But then we started getting to the acquisition thing. So we started to say, okay, everything we own is in these four walls. We have no personal net worth. It's a lot of stress on the nervous system day and night. We've got 30, 40 employees. And we're running out of our expertise in this business. We need some retail expertise. We need back of the house. We just need help. We need a big brother. So we started to look at people that we could do a deal with to where they could acquire a portion of the company, but we could stay on. And we didn't want to, stop at all. We love what we were doing. It was too much of our lives. And so we looked around and we sat with Timberland, we sat with Nike, Patagonia, 3 VC firms, and we had 5 offers. After a couple months, a banker was helping us. And our banker said to us, wait a minute, before you guys, let me throw another company in the mix. It's Liz Claiborne Company out of New York, a $5 billion garment company in New York. And we're like, Liz Claiborne, like, why? He said, just listen to them and talk to them. So the CFO flew in with a gal named Angela Ahrens, who, incredible lady. Pam and I sat with them for about 3 hours, and they blew our minds with the opportunities. First of all, their design resources. They had high-rise buildings with floors dedicated to like 60s paisleys and stripes, 70s, so much design influence and color theme programs they had. And Pam was just frothing at the mouth because her design team could just be like, it's just incredible the resources they had for design. And then they had retail expertise. They owned Lucky Jeans, Juicy Couture, some other brands that had big retail plays. They had that, obviously all the back of the house stuff they had. One thing they didn't have was any sustainability stuff, which we were working on. So we kind of helped them with that, with some of their other brands for a couple of years. So we did a deal with them. It was the 4th highest of the offers we had, but we sold 60% of our business to Liz Claiborne. And Pam and I and our employees hung on to 40% in the form of an earnout over 5 years. So we could still have this big brother, so to speak, and do what we love, but to have these great resources to really help the brand realize its potential. So we did that deal. And then within 6 months, Liz Claiborne started tail spinning their stock. For other reasons, JCPenney and other brands they were selling to started to tank. And so they were in trouble financially. And so they had to put us up for sale. And we were just like, wow, we're just getting integrated, a $30 million homegrown business with a $5 billion, giant Garmento public company, just getting integrated. And the CEO called me and my heart just dropped. And he says, we got to put you up for sale. I ran in our CFO's office and grabbed the agreement, which is about this thick, the sale agreement. And on page like 197, I found out that if they put us up for sale, we had the right to buy it back first refusal. So they honored that. And so they made us a great deal. We bought it back for a lot less than they paid for it. And they threw in software and employee bonuses and really took care of us because they felt like they took this little mom and pop company and put it in their blender and stirred it up and spit it out. So they felt obligated to get us back on track. And they were really great people. To be honest, when you think about public companies and the pressure they have, but they saw it through and really took care of us. So we're on our own again. We bought it back just less than 2 years later.
It was that one of those moments where it hit you. I think about this. I've never been a business owner myself, but I think of the pressure of, it's not just your livelihood that, you're depending on that, like to live, like everything you put in, you're trying to get something out so you can live and survive. But you've got, I don't know how many employees you had at the time, but 20, 30, 40, 100 employees. I mean, when you have that many people relying on you and families, and like, was that a moment for you where you're like, oh, wow, like what we do matters? I'm sure you had that moment beforehand, but.
Oh, absolutely. Every day it was like a family, many hand-me-down cars and refrigerators and, house payments. And, it was like a family. We took care of our people. We made, in the end, our core employees came out really, really well,
Right.
Financially. They stayed with us. And our first employee was with us 22 years, Damien, where he was helping me in the garage cutting.
Wow.
After doing job interviews out of college, after 2 months, 16 different interviews, he sat with me at 11 o'clock at night and he said, I've been in 16 different interviews and all these companies putting my suit on, and I'm here in the garage with you and Pam and the dogs, and this is my career. This is what I'm going to do. I said, really? You want to work here? He goes, yeah, I'm done interviewing. And 22 years later, and he's a multimillionaire now. He started at $7 an hour sleeping in the warehouse for a couple of years.
Wow. Jeez. Well, what changed after the that experience with the sale and then buying it back? What changed after that for the company?
For us inside, so the company never changed. We were super focused on the brand, especially because a $5 billion company just bought our company. So I'm like deep into climbing, deep into yoga, throwing anchors the other way purposely to really not give up the range and soften up, or they never told us what to design or what to make or who to sell. We're autonomous. We're on our own doing our own thing. But I was very conscious of the audience, these core consumers going, prAna sold out. So I wanted to show them that we're digging deeper. We are entrenching even deeper into the core audience, investing in the community. So we threw a lot of anchors that way. What happened? There's a big shift for us to say, okay, we've got a little bit of net worth now, personal, after these years of hanging it out, hanging out, credit cards buried, just getting cash flowing business was everything. No vacations, nothing. Like all the money was always in the business for those years. So we had a little breathing room because Liz Claiborne paid us more, and we bought it for more than we bought it back for. So we had a little cushion. We said, let's take in private equity now with expertise, somebody that can help us strategically. So we found a local guy. They found us actually in Solana Beach, California, Steel Point Capital, had a lunch with them, and we said, let's do this. So when we bought the company back, they owned majority of them. So they bought it back. We sold it for 54. We bought it back for 37 million. We put in 10 million and Steel Point put in 27 million. So they were majority owners. Two of us were on the board and 3 from Steel Point. We had a great relationship with them. They weren't in the garment business, but they were good strategic thinkers. And our goal was to scale the business from then it was 34 million to 100 million in 5 years. And that was a difficult moment for me because I raised my hand in the meeting. I said, I'm not the guy to do that. I'm a brand guy. I'm a culture guy. I'm not an operations guy that can scale from 30 some to 100 million in 5 years. That's a different kind of mind. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs. It's a really great lesson to know when to pass the baton. Know when you're out of your comfort zone, you're out of your skill set, and to be able to say, you know what, here you go. I'll flank you. I'll support you. Let's do this. And so we did. We hired a guy named Scott Kerslake, who started Athleta, the women's line Athleta, founder. And he really knew the direct-to-consumer business, which was a big growth opportunity for us. He was deep in the catalog business. And so that was a big shift. 2010, Scott came on and we shifted. And that's when our trend went from 8 or 10% direct-to-consumer to almost 50% direct-to-consumer.
Wow. And from 2010, that leads you to 2014, where...
Yeah, so 2014, we had a board meeting and Jim, our chairman from Steel Point said, guys, the market right now is so right. We've had people knocking on the door from big companies showing up, literally saying, we want to buy your company. A handful of people sitting with Pam and I. We're like, oh, we're not ready yet, And we're marching along this plan on target. We went from 35 to 45 to 62 to 82 to 99 million in 5 years. We hit it. We hit the targets, and all these people want to buy it, and the market was flush with cash, and we said we got to go to market. Like the VC, Steel Point loved the brand, and they didn't want to sell But Jim says, Beef, I've been around. When markets is hot and your brand has got all these bars moving up and right, sales, profitability, it's looking like it's a beautiful picture right now. You got to go to market. So we hired Baird as a banking firm. We interviewed 3 different firms. They won the job and they went to market. And we had 8 offers originally, then it got down to 3. Columbia was in the mix there. And even Steel Point said, it's not about the highest price here. Like, we love this brand and we know it has potential, and we're not going to just sell it to the highest bidder. And that's what they do. So that's what VCs do. They buy small and sell high.
Yeah.
But these guys had a conscience, and they know we did. And we didn't want our little baby going to somebody that's just going to, pour it out. So we had some criteria. Whoever we sold to had to have the resources to help the brand realize its potential. They had to have a respect for the culture and the direction of the brand, to not make a hard left turn as soon as they bought it. Keep things intact, keep the values, keep these principles and the special culture that we built intact. And then third was price. And so Columbia stepped up and rang all 3 bells. And we said, what an honor to be with a company like Columbia, who for 60, 70 years now has done such an incredible job. It's a different brand than ours, but as far as business people, ethical business people, the way they run their companies, we flanked them in the outdoor industry for all those years, and we saw what they did. We saw the amazing things they could do with a value type of brand, and the doors they could open, and the things they did for the dealers. So we were honored that they were the ones that won it, so to speak, and to be under their umbrella. It was a really Cinderella story for us.
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned, just like those criteria that you needed that company to hit. And I just wonder if it feels different now with some current events going on with a company like Eagle Creek kind of being phased out. Is that, I imagine that's kind of your worst case scenario, right? As someone looking to sell, is, you want to make sure that Columbia doesn't phase the company out in 10 years, 20 years. You hope it lives on. Is that different with that context?
Yeah, it would hurt for sure. It would hurt. And so for us to see the brand realize its potential, we're, like I said, we're honored, and it was a very, very happy ending for us and our key employees and partners.
Right. Did you stay on after that time, or kind of transition out over a year or 2?
So because the VC was in control, they didn't want any kind of earn out. They wanted a cash deal up front done. So that's the way it was for everyone. And then Pam and I chose, we had a good run, and it ended on a great note, and we decided to bow out. And we still, like I said, we're still helping the design team. I'm working on an award for a key employee that's been there 18 years last night. So we're still, we're welcome with the business. We're friends with everybody there. And I still get my mail there. My climbing boulder is still there in the yard. So we're tight with everyone at the company, but we have no employment agreements there at all.
Right. So what does that next chapter look like for you? You've been, away from the company for a few years now. I look at some of the other founders of outdoor companies in the industry. People like Jerry and Ann Cunningham, from one perspective, they sold their company in the 70s, and then Jerry went sailing, right? And they built domes, kind of around the country, and had their different houses, and did that sort of thing, and enjoyed their time and spent time outside. And then on the flip side, you have someone like Jim and Greg, who they sell wilderness experience and then go and work for Nike, Adidas, VF Corporation, and kind of have a whole second career. It sounds like you're doing a little bit of both. What is the second stage of your, career, you'd say, it look like for you? I know you're doing a lot to give back with Outdoor Foundation, involved in some other companies. When you and Pam, stepped aside from Columbia, what did you want your life to look like after that?
Great question. So, well, first of all, for me, it took about 2 years to wean myself off of prAna, because there was so much Pam, a little less, because she hired a design director and was kind of stepping back a little bit as far as her duties. So she was slowly weaning off. But it was so much of our life and so built around our lives and so much of our identity that it was very difficult to all of a sudden it was gone. You know, it was there, but it wasn't ours. So we're here, and you know, it was hard. It was emotionally hard, and so you know, I kept my fingers in a little bit here, and it helped to transition, you know, through the year, about a year or so. Then slowly wean myself off it, and it was difficult. And now it's great. You know, it's 7 years. It's been 2014 in May is when the deal went down. So you got to reinvent yourself, kind of, because you know your consciousness day and night is when you have a baby that you create. It's you know, that's, you're engaged, whether you are sleeping or awake or whatever you're doing, you're always engaged in it. So that was hard, but feeling good about it now. And you know, I've been on the Outdoor Foundation board 12 and a half years, and still rolling with that. That's really meaningful work. But really, I dove in. So Tim Boyle, I said, Tim, I might want to start something, a nonprofit. And Tim Boyle, the CEO of Columbia, said, Beav, whatever you want to do, I will match it. And yeah, I even have a 501c3 here we can use. And you know, if you want to focus on giving back in nonprofit, I'll help you with that. So I did some, you know, I've been involved in the Access Fund and Conservation Line, you know, different funds also. And it always seems to be you're chasing your fundraising, you know, those things. And it's kind of a grind. And the more I looked into it, I said, you know what, it seems like a real grind. And I hate asking people for money. Like, I'm so bad at it, you know. So I just started mentoring entrepreneurs, and kind of put the word out. And, you know, I never said no to anyone and never charged a penny. And it's just basically, I give people everything I have, every bit of experience and intelligence and anything I possibly give them in that time that I have with them. If it's 1 hour, I will just give them everything I got that's relative to their business for that 1 hour. But my thing is, I shake hands, good luck. You know, I let it go, because I'm kind of a nut and I carry stuff, you know, can't sleep at night and write down 1 million notes every night, still do. So I didn't want that on my nervous system, all these businesses, you know, investments and this and that. And I'll give you stock and this. I've never taken stock, never taken anything, because I just wanted to be free from it. But when I drop in, again, I'll bring you everything I got, but I'm going to drop out, you know, and let it go. So for me, it's healthier to do it that way. So that's really where I spend a lot of my time, with little businesses and all kinds of consumer products, even some service businesses, and things I don't know anything about, but every once in a while, there's a few nuggets that I could share from our business experience that bring value, hopefully. And Pam's doing some nonprofit stuff too. Rancho Santa Fe Women's Foundation for abused and underprivileged girls. And that stuff feels good. And then I'm on a handful of boards too, company boards.
Right.
Chris Sharma's climbing gyms, just opening our 3rd gym in Spain. You know, one of our key athletes and dear friends. So there was just 2 days ago, I had a 2-hour board call with that. So just trying to, you know, use all the hard-earned lessons that I've got through the years and share them with people that, you know, hopefully it brings value. And that feels good, you know, because financially we're okay. And I think when there's no financial connection and no exchange like that, it's just pure giving. It just feels good just to say, here, you know. And I don't, you know, every once in a while someone will send me a belt or a pair of shoes or whatever, but that's it. Like, there's no connection. And it just feels good to just say, you know, I've been fortunate in my career to have these experiences and be successful. And if I can help you, I feel good about that.
Well, where do you think you learned how to be so self-aware about what fulfills you? Were you always good at that? Was that the you know, meditation that taught you that? Like, where did you learn how to learn what fulfilled you? I mean, some of that you just learn over the course of life, but it seems like you've been able to find that throughout your career, whether you were, you know, building prAna at the peak or now in the stage you're at now.
Self-reflection, you know, through meditation, I think is important. And getting higher altitude, getting out of the world that you're in. And, I do get to fly airplanes. And for me, when you're above the world and all those little problems and issues are small, because you got to keep this piece of metal up in the air. It's kind of priority right now.
Yeah.
So just separating from the busyness and the day to day and the busy mind, and getting high altitude and looking down on it and looking at the macro view of things, and all the things happening, and how you can get caught up in taking down these, just change your states and getting caught in these rabbit holes and stuff. And I think just elevating, if that's the word, is just elevating, breathing. It's all going to be fine no matter what happens today or whatever. Just looking at the long-term view of things.
That's great, Beaver. I think that's probably the best possible note to end this on, unless we missed something. I don't know if we missed anything, but I think that's a great message to leave this on. But I just appreciate you taking the time. This has been a fun conversation. I've learned so much. It's amazing to hear your story, your story with Pam, and what you've been able to build together. So thanks for taking the time. This has been great.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and great questions, and what a great cause you guys have going there. It's really, really exciting. One day I do want to visit and check it out in real life. But congratulations on what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. You're definitely welcome anytime.
Thank you.